Greetings. I am Patrick Jerome, and today I'll be using skyTotems to compare the horoscopes of Donald Trump and Joe Biden. But before I begin, let me say two things. First, you can't tell from a horoscope whether someone will be a good president or a bad one. Even skyTotems, which is scientifically based, can't do that. But you can gain some insight into what motivates people, which is what I'll try to be doing here. Second, I don't support either Trump or Biden. They're both too old. Biden is half senile and Trump is a crotchety old man. But even if they were still young and vigorous, as they are in these pictures, I don't think either has the vision or courage that is needed at this crucial point in human history. What is needed? One, someone who will deal with the COVID-19 crisis. What does that mean, to deal intelligently with it? It means implementing a plan similar to the plans implemented in New Zealand and China. I won't go into them here, but you can Google them. More to the point, Trump and Biden could Google them. Indeed, they have the resources to do a lot more than Google. But they don't have the guts. Two, we need someone who will address climate change. Not just give it lip service, but really address it. Three, someone who will deal with the looming disaster brought on by nuclear weapons, nuclear power, and nuclear waste. If you think Fukushima is over, you're ill-informed, and Fukushima is Act 1 of a long drama. Four, someone who will address the huge gap between the rich and the poor. I could bring up other issues, but this video isn't about politics, it's about astrology. And I want to keep it focused on astrology. So let's begin. One of the first things skyTotems does is generate an archetype. And what's interesting is that Trump and Biden have exactly the same archetype, the professional. Just as interesting, they have the same sub-archetype, the steward. So they have a lot more in common than you might think. And it makes sense, them being the professional. After all, how many artistic types do you find running for president? I can think of one, Marianne Williamson, but how far did she get? The professional is characterized by one, strong ambitions, two, mainstream values and aspirations, and three, a mind focused on solving practical problems. It's a hardworking, conventionally minded archetype that funnels energy into utilitarian activities and takes a dismissive attitude towards those with vision and imagination. So Trump and Biden are the same type, but there are subtle differences. Trump is a yang-driven professional, whereas Biden is a consensus-building professional. The yang professional is driven primarily by a desire for three things: money, power, and status. Consensus-building professional is driven by the desire for one, security and stability, two, social acceptance, and three, solving problems using common sense. While Trump and Biden are both professionals, Trump is motivated by the need for status and Biden by the need for social acceptance. But let's be clear. Biden also wants status and Trump also wants social acceptance. It's part of being a professional. They also have the same subtype, the steward. This doesn't mean that they are stewards, but it does mean that they should be. It's the role professionals play in the creation when their heads are screwed on right. So what exactly is a steward? A steward is a good citizen who takes responsibility for the future. Husbanding resources and protecting the commons. Good stewards follow the motto, leave every place you go a little better than you found it. So let's start with Trump. Does he see himself as a steward, and if so, of what? The following quotes are taken directly from the White House website. The headline reads, President Trump's historic deregulation is benefiting all Americans. That's what a steward does, right? He does things that benefit everyone. Under the headline is a quote from Trump. We are now reducing the size, scope, and cost of federal regulations for the first time in decades, and we are already seeing the incredible results. After that, there's a general description of what he's done. Since taking office, President Donald J. Trump has led historic deregulation efforts to roll back red tape that burdened Americans and stifled economic growth. This explains what he sees himself as the steward of, the economy. It goes on, under President Trump's leadership, the administration has cut 8 1/2 regulations for every new rule, far exceeding his promise to cut 2 regulations for every new one. President Trump's deregulatory efforts have already slashed regulatory costs by nearly $50 billion, with savings reaching $220 billion once major actions are fully implemented. 16 pieces of deregulation legislation signed by President Trump are expected to increase annual real incomes by more than $40 billion. The Trump administration's deregulatory efforts will help save American households an estimated $3,100 each year. So this leads to certain questions. Let's assume that the facts are correct. Given Trump's tendency to exaggerate, it's possible, even likely, that they're not, but let's assume that they are. Let's assume that reduction in regulations have saved Americans $50 billion. The answer is, or rather the question is, what Americans? Who gets the $50 billion? And if the average household gets $3,100, how is that money distributed? Does every single family get $3,100? Or is the deregulation structured like Trump's tax cuts, where the rich get richer and the average American is saddled with an ever-growing national debt? But something even more important is at issue. Ending regulation of industry means that certain laws that were once in place are no longer in place. And deregulation in practice amounts to a massive gutting of environmental safeguards. According to the Brookings Institute, Trump has repealed no less than 74 environmental protections. Among them, there are regulations involving clean air, clean power, greenhouse gas emissions, humane treatment of animals, the regulation of organic livestock, protection of endangered species, protection of the national wildlife areas, control of methane, control of toxic waste. What he's done with his deregulation is an environmental nightmare. Just as scary, he has understaffed the Department of Energy, which keeps track of nuclear waste and nuclear bombs, and he has temporarily suspended all EPA enforcement during the pandemic. Not that he was doing much enforcement before the pandemic. And so while Trump wants us to think that he's a good steward, he isn't. He is the opposite of a steward. Rather than leaving the land a little better than he found it, he's destroying it. Rather than thinking 7 generations into the future, he is thinking now. And it's not an Eckhart Tolle version of now. It's a robber baron's. But what about Joe Biden? Does he see himself as a steward? To answer that question, I went to joebiden.com, and on page 1, there's a picture of Biden and Kamala Harris wearing masks along with a request for donations. I can give $15, $32, $50, $100, $250, $500, or $1,000 just by pressing a button. After scrolling down a considerable distance, I can push buttons to get Biden's stances on COVID-19, jobs, healthcare, education, disabilities, addiction, immigration, gun violence, racial and sexual discrimination, and clean energy. I pushed the button on COVID-19 and there's nothing real there, it's all BS. So I pushed the button on clean energy where it says, climate change poses an existential threat. And that's promising. Then it says, Joe Biden knows there is no greater challenge facing our country and our world. Wow. Maybe Biden is a steward. But think about it. If climate change is the greatest challenge facing the world, why is it hidden on button number 12? Shouldn't it be button number 1? Shouldn't it be something that Biden is shouting from the rooftops? So we have to ask ourselves, is Biden serious? Is he actually going to deal with climate change, or is he going to pass a bunch of half-assed measures? Unlike Trump, Biden has no record we can examine, but we can examine Obama's record, which is better than Trump's. It's not nearly good enough. Yes, a lot of the laws Trump has repealed are laws Obama put in, but none of them went far enough. You can't treat cancer with chamomile tea. And while Biden may want to be a good steward, it isn't possible within the social structure he embraces. His number one concern isn't saving the earth. It's the $1,500, $250, $132 that he invites us to contribute. Okay, we've looked at Trump and Biden and what they have in common. They're both professionals, and neither of them is a steward. Now, let's look at the differences. Let's start with Biden. He has no vocal on planets. His major aspects are a fourth quadrant sun and a Venus. Fourth quadrant sun and Venus combined with moon velocity 2. And here's what skyTotems has to say about that. The person has an exaggerated fear of looking bad in the eyes of others. He dreads the prospect of being publicly humiliated. He wants his clothes, his hair, his car, his house, his taste in movies, and his political views to fall within the range of normal. He is rarely the first person to speak. He prefers to hear what everyone else has said so that he can say the same thing. When he does something weird, he does it in secret. But if he's part of a group where everyone is weird, he'll be weird too. In public disputes, he sides with the person who has the most authority. Unless the whole room is in rebellion, in which case he takes no side at all. He's not exactly a conformist because secretly he feels so strange, and the stranger he feels, the more normal he strives to appear. But Biden is a politician, and politicians are used to being criticized, and they develop a pretty thick skin. But let's see this aspect through the lens of Biden's website. And why, although he describes climate change as an existential threat, he will almost surely, like Obama, make only token gestures to address it. The answer is money. Who is Biden afraid of? He's afraid of the donors. Why is he failing to act as a steward? Because he's afraid the money will dry up. Biden has one other relevant aspect, and generally speaking, it's a very nice aspect. My dad had it, and my dad was a great guy. And I have close friends who have it, and they're all great guys. But every single one of them is a follower. Only one president in history had it, Calvin Coolidge, who became president only because Harding died in office. And as president, Coolidge did almost nothing. The aspect is called Mercury and Venus invisible, and it occurs when both Mercury and Venus are so overwhelmed by the sun's light that they can't be seen with the naked eye. Symbolically, the person is not the sun. He's the sun's companion. He's not the Lone Ranger. He's Tonto. He's not Batman. He's Robin. He's not Don Quixote. He's Sancho Panza. He's not Barack Obama. He's Joe Biden. He's not the leader. He's the sidekick. He's not the president. He's the vice president. And it's very hard to shake that image. And one reason it's so hard is that it feels so natural. Okay, let's deal with Trump. First off, unlike Biden, Trump has a very strong and highly unusual chart. In addition to the ever-aggressive Goku on Mars, Trump has 3 stationary planets. It's noteworthy to have 1 stationary. It's unusual to have 2. But it's striking to have 3, a phenomenon that occurs less than 1% of the time. And it makes Trump a marked man. For good or ill, he's a marked man. Combining the meaning of all factors, 2 broad themes emerge. A giant ego and an equally giant intuition. Now I'm going to put up an aspect that shows Trump's ego mixed with some insecurity he feels. And it's written in the first person, so picture Trump speaking. I put up a tough front, hoping to intimidate people and hide the fact that I'm in pain. That front might consist of a lot of different things. It might be a fancy car, an impressive education, a high-status job, or a long list of awards. Or it might just be a loud voice or a big fist. But whatever it is, I have a tendency to bully people. I insist that you do things my way and punish you if you don't. The punishment can take a lot of forms. I might yell at you. I might ignore you. I might withhold favors from you. And while theatrically while theatrically dispensing favors to someone else. I might spread malicious rumors about you. I might employ my fist. But the most common thing I do is fail to give you the credit you deserve. I exaggerate the value of my accomplishments while deprecating the value of yours. At the same time, I also have a tendency to lavishly praise people. And the person I'm demonizing today might be the very same person I praised 6 months ago. It all stems from the fact that I'm in pain. And it's complicated by the fact that I don't want anyone to see that pain. Just so you know, this blurb was not written with Trump in mind. It was lifted word for word from skyTotems. So Trump is a bully and he's insecure, but with Mercury on the edge and Neptune stationary, he has two of the greatest indicators of intuition in all of astrology. And his ability to verbalize things that other people are feeling is truly remarkable. In giving voice to the voiceless, he takes on the mantle of an oracle. He has a gift for calling attention to problems that the mainstream media ignores, but which anyone with two eyes can see are problems. For example, fake news. Of course the news is fake. Not all of it, but huge portions. Another way to put it is that every outlet has its bias. And the choice of what is covered reflects that bias. Of course, when Trump calls attention to this, he does it in a self-serving way. Anything that criticizes him is fake and anything that praises him is honest. But the fact that he's a lousy steward of his insight doesn't make the insight invalid. Example 2, elections are rigged. Of course the elections are rigged. It's a huge problem, and it's only getting worse. George W. Bush stole the election from Gore in 2000. In 2004, he stole it even more blatantly from Kerry, with results in Ohio, Iowa, Wisconsin, Colorado, and New Mexico being flipped. And in the 2016 Democratic primaries, Hillary Clinton stole at least 8 states from Bernie Sanders. Cheating is rampant. But until Trump spoke up, nobody even dared mention the issue. But the problem, once again, is that Trump isn't approaching the issue as a steward. A steward would say, our election system is broken and we gotta fix it, and propose real reforms. Instead, Trump is approaching the problem as a partisan who complains about cheating when it goes against him and supports cheating that works in his favor. Donald Trump has large gifts. You can't get elected president with no organization and no party apparatus unless you have an enormous ability to inspire people. But with such gifts come responsibility. And over again, Trump has ignored his responsibilities and failed to act as a steward. So in this election upon which the fate of the planet may very well rest, we have a choice between 2 old men. One, the reincarnation of Calvin Coolidge, the other, a robber baron. And it doesn't bode well for the world. That's all I have for now. This is Patrick Jerome saying, see you next time.